Hey fams, welcome back to Africa. Explored, please. If you have not subscribed, please click on the subscription button and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. The clock is ticking, each second carrying immense weight. The sands of time are slipping away, creating a palpable sense of urgency. For Captain Ibrahim Traore, the weight of a nation rests on his young shoulders. Whispers of forced resignation, hushed conversations behind closed doors, and threats against his life, a constant shadow lurking in the background, echo through Ouagadougou's corridors of power. The very walls seem to vibrate with uncertainty. The young leader, once hailed as a revolutionary, who seized control with promises of security and stability for a nation yearning for peace, now finds himself cornered, the very ground beneath him shifting. Regional powers are losing patience, their diplomatic niceties wearing thin, and the international community, with its watchful eyes and intricate web of alliances, is watching with concern, assessing every move, every decision. His bold defiance, his unwavering stance against external pressures, once a source of support, a symbol of national pride and resistance, may now be his greatest liability, a dangerous game of brinkmanship. The very forces, the soldiers and commanders who pledged allegiance, that brought him to power, riding a wave of popular discontent, could orchestrate his downfall, a swift and decisive reversal of fortune. The question is not if, but when, the inevitable moment of truth, the breaking point will come, the moment that defines his legacy for Africa's youngest head of state. Will he weather the storm or be swept away by it? Internally, the security situation remains dire, a festering wound that refuses to heal, with jihadist groups emboldened and increasingly powerful, controlling vast swathes of the country, challenging the very sovereignty of the nation. Externally, ECOWAS is tightening the screws, increasing the pressure on the regime, insisting military rule. The iron fist of authoritarian control is no longer acceptable. The demand for a return to civilian governance grows louder. Every public appearance, every carefully crafted statement, is scrutinized for signs of weakness, a telltale sign of crumbling resolve. The pressure is immense, a crushing weight on his shoulders, not just from diplomats, with their carefully worded pronouncements, but from economic sanctions, crippling the nation's already fragile economy and regional isolation. Burkina Faso finds itself increasingly cut off from the world, in a region rife with coups where the spectre of military takeovers looms large. Traore's personal safety, his very existence, is a constant concern. Every shadow, every whisper, a potential threat. He came to power, propelled by ambition and a promise of change, by ousting a fellow officer, a stark reminder of the ruthlessness of power, a reminder of his precarious position. The same fate could await him. Is there a plot brewing, a clandestine scheme taking shape within his own ranks? Are those closest to him the greatest threat? Are external forces seeking, pulling the strings from afar, to destabilize his regime? Is Burkina Faso a pawn in a larger geopolitical game? For Traoré, facing an uncertain future, the fight for Burkina Faso's future, its very survival as a nation, is now a fight, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds for his own survival. The stakes could not be higher. Before assuming the mantle of the presidency, a position of immense power and responsibility, Ibrahim Traoré was at the time a relatively little-known army captain, his name not yet etched in the annals of national leadership. Born in 1988, his early life unfolded against a backdrop of significant challenges and transformations within Burkina Faso. He grew up amid persistent political instability, a recurring theme in the nation's narrative. He also witnessed the ever-present threat of extremism, a dark cloud looming over the Sahel region. Despite these challenges, he quickly began earning a reputation within military circles, distinguishing himself as a determined and focused officer dedicated to his duty and country. He served on the front lines, experiencing firsthand the harsh realities of conflict and the sacrifices made by his fellow soldiers. Frustrated by what he perceived as government failures to adequately address the nation's challenges, he and his peers increasingly saw the morale of soldiers plummeting, demoralized by the lack of support and resources. They also witnessed the army ill-equipped, lacking the necessary tools to effectively combat the growing threats. After initially throwing his support behind Damiba's coup in 2022, Hoping for a positive change in direction, Traoré ultimately decided to lead his own intervention, a mere 8 months later, a swift and decisive move that would reshape the nation's destiny. He moved to oust Damiba, citing the previous leader's inability to effectively address the country's pressing issues. This action propelled him into the role of transitional president, a position he assumed with a clear vision for the future. At just 34 years old, he became one of the youngest leaders in Africa, a symbol of a new generation taking charge. He promised the people of Burkina Faso that he would prioritize reclaiming territory, wresting it back from the grip of militants and extremist groups that had plagued the region for far too long. He also pledged to restore national dignity, instilling a sense of pride and unity among the citizens of Burkina Faso. In his public appearances, he presented himself as first and foremost a soldier on a mission, driven by a sense of duty and a commitment to serving his nation. He sought to distance himself from traditional politics, presenting himself not as a politician, but as a man of action. His relative youth, coupled with his direct frontline experience in the fight against extremism and his outspoken anti-colonial rhetoric, struck a chord with many across the country. His message resonated deeply with many, particularly those who felt marginalized and disenfranchised. Under his leadership, Traoré distanced Burkina Faso from its long-standing ties with France, a move that signaled a significant shift in the nation's foreign policy. Instead, he began seeking new alliances and partnerships on the international stage, most notably forging closer ties with Russia, a relationship that raised eyebrows in many Western capitals. This dramatic pivot was framed by Traoré and his supporters as an essential step towards reclaiming true sovereignty and charting an independent course for Burkina Faso. These bold moves set the stage for potential confrontation and further geopolitical realignment in the region. His rise to power was more than just a simple change in leadership at the helm of the government. It represented a seismic shift, a fundamental transformation in the country's political landscape, a change that reverberated throughout the nation's institutions. It also signaled a significant shift in its geopolitical orientation, altering its relationships with key international players. With these changes underway, the stage was set for a dramatic standoff, a tense confrontation that would test the resolve of the new leadership and determine the future of Burkina Faso. The events that would follow would be pivotal in shaping the nation's destiny. Instability defines Burkina Faso today. Jihadist groups control about 40% of the country, imposing their own rule and launching deadly attacks. Over 2 million people are displaced, crowding camps around government-held cities. The failure to stop the violence toppled 2 presidents in less than a year. Traoré staked his presidency on doing better, launching aggressive recruitment for civilian militias. But arming civilians has blurred lines, fueling intercommunal violence and abuses by all sides. Human rights violations and reprisals have become tragically common. The conflict has devastated the economy, closed schools and clinics, and crippled agriculture. The government pours resources into war, leaving little for development. The state itself is unraveling, and Traoré's promises are tested daily. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, stands as West Africa's prominent political and economic bloc. It now faces what might be its toughest challenge yet, a complex web of political instability and security concerns. This challenge is largely fueled by a wave of coups, rapidly spreading across the already fragile Sahel region, threatening the stability of the entire area. Initial strategies involving sanctions and suspensions, unfortunately, failed to effectively reverse these military takeovers and restore civilian rule. The situation is particularly concerning in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, all of which have experienced recent coups. In response, the juntas formed the Alliance of Sahel States, solidifying their cooperation. In a dramatic move, they announced their withdrawal from ECOWAS, further complicating the regional dynamics. Under new ECOWAS leadership, specifically under the guidance of Ibrahim Traore, the organization is actively recalibrating its strategy by carefully balancing firm principles of democracy and regional stability with the need for pragmatic engagement with the current realities on the ground. As a gesture of goodwill, some sanctions on Niger were lifted, primarily for humanitarian reasons, to alleviate suffering. However, core demands for a return to democratic governance still remain firmly in place. ECOWAS insists on a swift and clearly defined timeline for a full return to constitutional rule and democratic processes. The bloc deeply fears that the coup contagion could spread further across the region, threatening decades of hard-won democratic progress and stability. As for Traoré, the grace period for demonstrating a commitment to democracy is definitively over. ECOWAS is watching with renewed focus and determination. The region's democratically elected leaders are drawing a firm line in the sand, signaling their resolve to defend democratic values. ECOWAS's ultimatum to Traoré is clear: a rapid return to constitutional order. The original transition timetable, elections by July 2024, has been abandoned by Traoré's government, citing insecurity. ECOWAS demands a new, realistic timetable developed through national dialogue leading to near-term elections. The bloc also insists on guarantees for political freedoms and human rights, including protection for opponents and journalists. Political sanctions remain, and Burkina Faso is suspended from ECOWAS bodies. The threat of targeted sanctions and financial restrictions looms. ECOWAS wants more than a formal election; it demands a genuinely free and fair contest. The ultimatum now hangs over Traoré's presidency. In Burkina Faso's capital, support for Traoré is loud and passionate. Many see him as a patriot standing up to foreign interference, prioritizing security over elections. Rallies fill the streets, with demonstrators waving Burkinabe and Russian flags, denouncing ECOWAS and France. For these supporters, security comes first, democracy can wait. But not everyone agrees. Civil society leaders and political parties fear indefinite military rule will deepen instability and isolation. Many are hesitant to speak out, wary of the junta's popularity. The government responds to ECOWAS with defiance, insisting security is the prerequisite for any transition. Official statements echo the street. The reconquest of territory is the priority. This narrative paints ECOWAS as out of touch with Burkina Faso's grim realities. Burkina Faso's crisis is part of a broader Sahelian realignment. The alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, has formed a mutual defense pact, breaking with France and ECOWAS. Russian advisors and equipment are replacing French troops, celebrated as a win for sovereignty. The AES alliance neutralized ECOWAS's threat of military intervention, showing new regional solidarity. For Traoré, the alliance offers military, diplomatic, and ideological support. ECOWAS now faces a coordinated bloc-building alternative structures. The AES withdrawal from ECOWAS signals a dramatic new path. Traoré's fate is now tied to his counterparts in Mali and Niger, turning a national crisis into a regional confrontation. Traoré's response to ECOWAS is a mix of public defiance and strategic maneuvering. He frames the crisis as a choice between sovereignty and submission, rallying domestic support. Behind the scenes, he avoids outright rejection of dialogue, using delays and the security situation as pretexts. Traoré consolidates power by strengthening control over the military and expanding the VDP militia. This creates a loyal, armed base invested in his rule. He bets that battlefield successes will make his leadership unassailable. Traoré is playing for time, hoping international actors will accept his rule if he stabilizes the country. His strategy: deflect pressure, consolidate power, and wait for the tide to turn. Burkina Faso and the Central Sahel stand at a crossroads. One scenario: Traoré, backed by the AES and popular support, resists ECOWAS and deepens ties with Russia. Another: ECOWAS escalates sanctions, risking economic collapse and internal unrest, or even a counter-coup. A third, more hopeful path: compromise, an agreed transition timetable, national dialogue, and eventual elections. The outcome will ripple across West Africa, testing regional integration and democratic norms. The crisis is a test of Africa's ability to solve its own problems. The future of governance, extremism, and geopolitics in the region hangs in the balance. For Burkina Faso's people, the stakes are existential. Their fate is caught between war and a high-stakes political showdown. The world is watching as the next chapter unfolds.